I would first like to introduce Peggy Johnson from Microsoft. Um, as the Executive Vice President of Business Development, Peggy is responsible for driving strategic partnerships and transactions to accelerate growth for Microsoft and its customers. She works with external partners around the world, ranging from startups to large-scale enterprises, to identify areas of collaboration, drive innovation, and unlock shared value. In this capacity, she also manages Microsoft's relationship with the venture capital community and oversees strategic investments through the company's corporate venture fund, M12. Prior to this role, Peggy spent 24 years at Qualcomm, where she served as a member of Qualcomm's executive committee and held various leadership positions across engineering, sales, marketing, business development, and ran Qualcomm's Internet Services unit. Prior to joining Qualcomm, she worked for General Electric's Military Electronics Division. She serves on the board of directors for BlackRock Incorporated and on the advisory board for the nonprofit Huntington's Disease Society of America San Diego chapter. She has been recognized by multiple organizations, including Women in Technology International to the 2013 Hall of Fame Award and STEM 100 Women Leaders in STEM 2012 as a global business leader. Peggy will have a fireside chat with Tamara Stevens, the managing director at M12. Tamara leads investing and VC partnerships for M12 in North America. She is an experienced operator and entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience in Silicon Valley at both startups and large tech companies. Her last startup was Accompli, a mobile productivity app where she led sales and BD. Microsoft acquired Accompli, now called Outlook Mobile, in 2014, after which Tamara went on to lead business development for the broader Office 365 organization. Prior to Accompli, Tamara successfully helped lead several startups to either IPO or acquisition, including Software.com, Boingo, Fusion One, and Path. She began her tech career at Sun Microsystems and Silicon Graphics and has deep industry expertise across financial services, telecom, education, and mobile. As a serial entrepreneur, she understands fundraising from the perspective of the entrepreneur and is a valuable go-to-market advisor. She has a Bachelor of Science in Finance from Michigan State University. And on a personal note, I've had the opportunity to work with Peggy at Qualcomm with and for her. She's an amazing leader who I have constantly learned from over the years in areas such as scaling for growth, striking partnerships and collaborations, prevailing in tough times, and rapid execution. Having her as a mentor and a friend has been truly inspirational. I hope her learnings, along with Tamara today, on culture as a cornerstone for growth and innovation will be of value to you all. Please join me in welcoming Peggy.
Thank you, Ajit. Thank you. First, I just want to say congratulations to all of you for being selected as finalists. I was looking over the list and, I'm just so impressed by your focus and your commitment really to solving some of our most pressing issues like climate change, disease, and inequality. We're at a moment in time right now where we really need bold thinking from entrepreneurs like you. So I'm honored to be speaking with you today. As Rajiv already mentioned, my name is Peggy Johnson. I lead business development at Microsoft, and my team's job is to accelerate Microsoft's missions and their ambitions by working with others in the market through partnerships, acquisitions, and investments from M12, which is our corporate venture fund. And as Rajiv said, I joined Microsoft in 2014 after spending about 25 years at Qualcomm. And during that time, I had actually really never considered leaving Qualcomm. It's a great company. And then one day, about 6 years ago, I got a call from Microsoft. And Satya Nadella at the time was very new to his role, but he was already doing some interesting things. If you remember, he was putting Microsoft Office onto Apple devices, onto iOS, and people were starting to notice and wondering what was percolating up on that Microsoft campus, and myself included. And so, my curiosity was piqued. So I decided to fly up to Redmond and to meet with Satya. And it was during that meeting that he laid out his vision for the company and the culture he was looking to build. And his vision for the culture that he wanted to build at Microsoft is really what hooked me and what has made me such a passionate believer in the power and really just the sheer importance of culture. And his vision really started with a mission. And it was one that was clear and very purpose-driven. And that is to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. It's super bold and inspiring for sure, but more importantly, everything we do as a company really ties back to that mission. So everyone from our senior leadership team to our interns to our board of directors, everybody knows what our focus is. And as leaders of your own companies, I'm sure you can understand the importance of having a clear North Star to orient each of your employees. But it really also sets the tone for establishing the type of culture that you want to create in your companies. And I have to say, the single biggest impact on Microsoft's transition has been our focus on culture. So as you think about growth, I'd like to offer some insight from Microsoft, a company that shifted its mission from putting a PC on every desktop to empowering every person on the planet to achieve more. Some of you may have read Satya's book. It's called Hit Refresh. And if you haven't, I'd highly recommend it. In it, Satya talks about a blueprint that he has for Microsoft's culture, and he really outlines the 3 areas that he felt were critical to transforming the company's culture. The first was we always had to be learning and to bring that learning into Microsoft. Second was this focus on diversity and inclusion, super strong focus. And he reasoned that if Microsoft was going to serve the planet, as our mission states, we better reflect the planet. And then lastly, innovation and competition, they don't respect our silos inside the company. So we had to transcend those barriers and act like one organization. So in terms of guidance, I'd offer some lessons that we've learned along the way. And I'd say that it's a lot easier to start from a place of intentionality, really, and to build a great culture from day one than to have to change one from an established company. So you're already ahead. For Microsoft, from where we are today, it has required this complete shift in thinking and a real change in our mindset. We needed to shed our arrogance and focus on what really was best for our employees and our customers. So you have an opportunity to avoid the need to hit refresh, and you can build something inclusive and empowering really from the very start. Next, I'd say be real thoughtful about what it is you're building and who you are looking to serve. And then ask yourselves, does your team represent your customers? We've found that diversity drives innovation. You just need this broad range of voices and perspectives to chip away at some of the biases that are still existing out there in the workforce, and that'll make your products better. I have a great example of this. Back when we were first working to launch Kinect, which if you remember was that motion sensing device for the Xbox 360, it saw your movements. A woman on the team took the device home to test it with her family and friends. And in the middle of all the fun, she noticed that while the device was great at recognizing and responding to her husband, it didn't really work well for her or her children, or actually any of her female friends. And she took that observation back to the engineering team and discovered that the Kinect testing group was all men aged 18 to 34. So they tested it only on men. And thanks to that observation, not only was the technology adjusted to be more inclusive, which obviously created a better product for all of us, but it exposed a big flaw in our approach to testing. Now, Kinect has become a better product, and the entire technology called Kinect now is inside of our Azure cloud, and it helps fuel things like HoloLens and Windows, and it's now available really to be used by billions in the years to come. But it could have been, it could have stayed in that flawed shape if not for that testing of that single female employee. And so it's big shifts like that diversity can really help with. Lastly, I would say leadership is a privilege, and that means it comes with tremendous responsibility. What I've learned as a leader is that mindset is as important as skill set. you're responsible for setting the tone for those around you, and they'll look up to you for that clarity. But really, you don't have to do it alone. Leadership is about listening and learning. And I would say, let a learn-it-all mindset rather than a know-it-all mindset guide you as you build your company culture. And I would also say, don't shy away from uncomfortable discussions or hard questions. We've been having a lot of those at Microsoft over the past few weeks. Set your minds to seeking them out and then learning from the challenges that they present. Having a growth mindset like this has helped us immensely at Microsoft, and I believe it can help serve you equally as well. And if you combine that with your energy and your determination, really you have everything you need to succeed. At this point, I'd like to invite Tamara Steffens from our M12 team to join me so she can share some of her insights. She's got a deep experience and background with startups, and she can talk about building great companies as well as investing in them. So thanks, Tamara. Thanks for joining me this morning.
Thanks, Peggy. I'm glad to be here.
Are you calling in from Texas?
Nope, I'm on, yes, I am. I'm on video from Texas, so.
Oh, terrific, terrific. Okay, well, I do see you. I wasn't sure where you were at. I think this is a very global audience this morning. So I'll just start right in, Tamara. You know, you've really been on both sides of the table, so to speak. And I just wanted to start by asking you why every startup should be thinking about culture as they're building their company.
Yeah, I have to admit, I agree with everything you said about having the right diverse team to build the right product, especially if you're trying to be global, which most companies eventually will get to, you know, a global offering. But somebody asked me once, you know, when you're at a small company, you know, how do you build that? And I think there's, you know, you come up with the culture you want that's going to work to create a great company, and then you have to trust in the people you hire. And I have an example that I frequently use and I laugh at because I grew up outside of Detroit and played a lot of softball and bowling, you know, in the Midwest. We like those two sports.
Yeah.
And it was a co-ed team, lots of fun, you know, you meet after work and, you know, I think mostly because people wanted to go have a beer later on, but I'm always competitive, as you know, Peggy. Yes. And I remember this team was just great. And, you know, the shortstop kind of created the team, and he was definitely the leader on the team. And, you know, we're playing in a pretty competitive game, and we were doing okay. I really thought we would be able to pull it off. It was a very close game. But then he didn't trust anyone on the team, and he started like running to right field to catch a ball. And I'm like, if you're not on shortstop, if somebody throws to second and they overthrow, or you need to back somebody up, we're all in the wrong positions. And so the game ended up being just chaos, and we didn't win. And I remember thinking, you got to play your position. And so when you hire people, and you know that, and again, it was a co-ed team and we had a lot of good players, but you got to trust and you got to let people play their position. And I think that's so important in a small company, right? You can't have the leader or the few top people. If you and Satya were running all over Microsoft trying to do everybody's job, I don't think it would get done that well, right? And so I think that's one of the most important things is you create the team, you got to trust in that team. The team should be diverse and let people do their job.
No, I think that's super important. I played shortstop too, but I was not very good, so I wouldn't have been that guy. But I certainly, you know, understand what you're saying, and I think that actually can be hard for a founder, you know, to really trust and let go a little bit.
Yep.
We've seen quite a bit of that with the startups that you've mentored over the years.
Yep, but definitely.
Yeah. But I remember back when you came to Microsoft, as Rajiv said, and you mentioned you came from Accompli, which had just built this fantastic app of Outlook, Microsoft Outlook on iOS. It was wonderful, and it drew us to the company and then drew us to the acquisition. And it's interesting. You went from a pretty small company to a really big company. And I was wondering, how did Accompli's culture differ from Microsoft's? I mean, certainly there were differences. I just love to hear from you, from your perspective. I've never heard you tell that story. What were some of the differences that you noticed?
Yeah, well, as you know, we were only 11 people at Acompli, and we had a couple of contractors in addition to that, but very small team. And so you, as a small team, you kind of do everything. I mean, I even got involved a lot in QAing the product and finding bugs and logging them. And we came out with our Android product, and there were only a few of us that used Android. So I think I literally QA'd the product top to bottom. And so when I got to Microsoft, I was, still used to doing like 4 jobs, and they were like, no, we have like talent, like we can help you guys. It was so refreshing how much you could get done with a broader pool of resources. So that was fantastic. And I did think, I have, I'm addicted to startups. I love entrepreneur environments. And so I thought I wouldn't stay very long. And then I found, wow, Microsoft actually is very startup friendly. Like they want people to start new products, to add features, to really create new things. And I was pleasantly surprised at that, and the work ethic overall. I mean, we were trying to get the Acompli product turned into Outlook Mobile and go out to the market. And I remember, meeting with Apple, and they wanted a few changes in the product. And I was texting while I'm in Cupertino, and the engineers were like, we will get it done by tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. And I was like, well, that means you guys are going to be staying up all night. And they were like, that's fine, we'll do it. And we got the product out the next day. So I would have normally seen that in a startup environment. Absolutely. I didn't think I would see it in Microsoft, and I see it every day, and I love it.
Yeah. I mean, that work ethic is amazing at Microsoft. But something that I don't know how much you realize, but we were learning from Acompli. You may have only been 11 people, but that was actually part of the culture that Satya was pushing, was be listeners, people, listen. And so we listen to Acompli. We want it to be as nimble as you, so we would watch your processes as well. And I feel like it was very much a two-way street. Maybe we were able to supercharge Acompli with the teams we had in place and the ability to work, these hours to get a product out the door with a large team. But we also learned quite a bit from Acompli, and it's really it really can be a two-way street between a big company and a small company. But you have to be listeners. Both sides have to be listeners, right?
Yep, totally agree.
It doesn't quite work. Another thing, you've been in the startup industry for a long time, and I'm just wondering, are you seeing any difference in founders today versus say 20 years ago? Because certainly the startup industry and just startups and the whole process around startups has really evolved. But from a founder perspective, what do you see that's different from say 20 years ago when you first stepped into it?
Yeah, I definitely think, and it's not just that they're younger founders or newer founders. It's really any company that we've looked at in the past couple of years. I've noticed its culture is like it's a cornerstone to what they bring. And when they talk about their products, often they bring up culture, and they're very conscious of it. And even when we just recently did the Female Founders Competition and meeting a lot of those founders, it was a cornerstone. And I didn't see that 20 years ago. I'm not saying it didn't exist and I didn't work for companies that had great culture. I just don't know that it was the cornerstone of building the company and making sure that was intact so that they could have the strength of that culture going forward as they grew. So I see that a lot, which I love. And I think that the change in the world and in the environment has made, younger founders wise beyond their years. I'm constantly thinking, wow, I'm blown away by even as you pointed out, the people in the Extreme Tech Challenge and the companies that we're looking at, And I've been looking at enabling tech. It's unbelievable. So
Yeah.
I'm really impressed with what is coming out of new companies and the cultural cornerstone of most of them that we see.
Yeah, one thing that I thought was interesting is when Microsoft was, we were going through a fair amount of unconscious bias training, and we had built some fabulous tools for it. And I remember our startups were asking it, like it was a core element for them as they were building their companies, but being very small, they didn't have the means to build their own tools to really come up with training programs and things for unconscious bias. So they reached out to us at Microsoft and said, do you have anything you can share so we can build our company from the start, really understanding what unconscious bias is and hopefully quelling that within the company. And I just thought that was super interesting. And as a Microsoft who had the means to build these tools, we were able then to share them with some of the companies in the M12 portfolio who were looking for that support.
Yeah, and we still share as much as we can with our startups if they're interested, and most of them are. It's one of the things we can offer at Microsoft, that we have extensive resources, particularly in the growth mindset and some of the training that we do that we can share with them.
Yeah, and I think it's incumbent upon us. We're nurturing these companies inside our portfolio, and to the extent that we have these sorts of tools, and they're good tools, they're quality tools. It's been great that we've been able to do that sharing and impart some of that wisdom on these smaller companies without that means. I think when you look at leaders, founders, and when you look across the industry, I would love to hear from your perspective, just seeing, because you have such a wide range of spectrum of companies that you've engaged with. What do you see are sort of qualities of a good leader when you're, and the qualities of a founder? That do you see these qualities early on and know this company is going to be successful because of those qualities? I just love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, thanks, Peggy. I wish I could just pick every great company, but we know that's not, that's a little bit of a lottery. But I will say one of the traits that I look for, and I think, especially as the company gets going, is the founder transparent with all of the employees? And a lot of times they'll, as new founders get going, they'll ask advice and they'll be like, should I tell everybody this? Should I tell people what we're doing? And I'm like, be transparent. You've got 10 people, 20 people, 30 people in the company. If something, you're going to miss a date, it's taking longer to raise around, what the valuation is, where is the finish line, and constantly repeating everything over and over again on a monthly basis. Being transparent as a startup, I think, is one of the most important things. You can then get the employees to buy in on the finish line. Everybody needs to know where the finish line is, right? And where are we going together? And that will change. I mean, you may change the product, you may change your exit strategy and go with an acquisition as opposed to an IPO. There's a number of things that are going to change along your journey, and you want everybody to be on the same journey, right? Everybody's looking ahead and moving forward. So I really think transparency is probably the number one thing I look for when I talk to founders.
And founders right now, are they worried about raising money in this environment?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a difference when, fortunately my age has some advantage in history. I have a lot of experience going back to, early 2000s, then to 2008, where it was very difficult to raise money. And mostly because there wasn't money on the sidelines, right? The funds weren't as big and rich as they are today. The one fortunate thing we have in today's market is most funds are big, right? And they have a lot of money. So there is a lot of money on the sidelines. So I think that's good. And I do think that founders are very concerned about understanding how long this economic situation is going to last. Is it really going to be a V-shaped recovery? Is it going to take 6 months? Is it going to take 12? I don't think we know yet. And I think it's, I've seen most of them worry about having, 24 months of cash available. They all seem to be taking, at least the ones that M12 has been working with and the ones we've been talking to about investing in, they all seem to be taking the right steps to preserve their cash and understand what the economic situation is right now.
Right, because you sit on the board of a number of M12's portfolio companies, so you must be hearing this from some of them at least.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And there's two types of companies right now, and certainly more than that. I'm probably putting into not enough buckets, but some of our companies have really seen a huge spike in growth because of COVID, because of the current situation. It may be that they're a productivity app, so they were able to take advantage of this. Some of our healthcare investments have really taken off. So we've seen some of that. Others, fortunately, I don't think a lot of them are being hit as hard as we might have thought, but they're being more conservative, right? Their sales have slowed slightly based on decision process and such because of the economic situation. So we're kind of seeing, both. But some are getting a big bump because of this change in the way we work, if you will.
Right. Certainly at Microsoft, we saw that with our Teams product. We had quite an uptick, and companies needed those tools and they needed them quickly. And also gaming. Gaming certainly had an uptick during this COVID period. M12 overall focuses on the enterprise space. I would be curious to know what you look for from the teams who are seeking investment. So a team walks in, they've got a great enterprise SaaS software that they're building. What is it specifically that you're looking for from those teams who are looking for investment from you? What sells you on them?
Yeah, so, it's interesting because when we first started the fund, we did a little bit more late stage investments in Series B and C for the first couple of years. And as you know, in the last couple of years, we've tried to lean in more on early stage Series A, and we're even doing a few seed investments. And we do like to lead when we do Series A. The harder part of doing Series A is it's generally a much smaller company. And so you're really trying to think further out. Is this product, is this team going to be able to get to an exit? So I think when we're looking at Series A, we look at product, right? What is the vision and what is their go-to-market? What do they think their total market is? And if they can define that, and even if we don't understand the product entirely, we'll dig in and figure it out. So, for me, I really look at go-to-market and then the total market share of what this solution can be. Usually they're not there yet, right? Because it's a Series A and early stage, but we try to work through it with them and figure out, where do they think they're going to go?
So yeah, I guess that's one of the ways we can kind of give them, a leg up, because we can put together our ability to tap into those groups at Microsoft to do some analysis of the market for them and give them a little more, a few more tools that they can work with by understanding a lot of that data that we can bring to bear for them.
Right, and we have Microsoft for Startups and M12, so we really try to wrap our arms around new technology in the market and get them as much resource as possible at Microsoft, right? Because fortunately we're global and we're broad enough to be able to manage most of the market. So if we can't help them at M12 directly, then we'll make sure Microsoft for Startups steps in and helps them as well.
Right. One of the things I think your team's done so well is it's what we call portfolio development managers. So they help the companies in M12 portfolio navigate Microsoft because sometimes these companies are, could be 5 people and they've got a great idea and a great product. But when you look in at Microsoft, it can be super hard to find the right area to connect to. we're pretty massive. So I think your team's really done a great job of making those internal connections, and then helping them navigate and kind of help shepherd them through the company, if you will.
Yeah, and it's one of our big value adds at Microsoft, besides at M12, besides the size of our fund and what we can do with our finances. It's pretty important if we can get them into the broad Microsoft sales organization and into our joint customers, or find joint customers together. Hopefully we can really help them with that growth strategy, and understanding what the Microsoft machine can really do for them. And it's been really successful.
Yeah. No, we've had some great outcomes from that. Switching a little bit, I think one of the great things that I took away from Satya's book is how it outlines this. It suggests there is ability to reinvigorate culture, and he showed how Microsoft kind of rebooted itself after 40 plus years. It was really an amazing refresh, if you will. But it was all done, because of the shifting culture. That was how Satya was able to change the company. I think startups in particular have an opportunity to learn from, maybe some of our mistakes along the way. One area that we now see as critically important is diversity and inclusion. It's as important to our success as any strategy or technology. That was just made so clear over the last few years. And, gender equality is, I think, number 5 on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So it's super important, top of mind for the world. And bringing it back to the startup community, I know we've all read and heard about the gap that comes around the funding of female founders. And it's just so frustrating that that gap still remains. So how many years since you've started in this industry, Tamara, and we still see that gap with female founders. I know it's driven our female competition and some other initiatives, and obviously this wonderful effort today that we're involved in. What is M12 specifically doing about this to address this issue? Everybody talks about it, but what are the actions that M12 has actually been taking to try to close that funding gap?
Yeah, thanks, Peggy. So as you mentioned, it's near and dear to our fund's focus, and we've had 2 female founders competitions, one last year and one we just did virtually. We were on track to do it in person, and then we had this, I think we were one of the first virtual events because it was right after we all started working from home. We did it in partnership this year with Mayfield and with Pivotal Ventures, which is Melinda Gates's venture fund. And I think that helped us broaden the event and get more exposure out there in the venture community. I mean, as you know, less than 3% of female founder, or less than 3% of the venture funds go to female founders. And if we can continue to highlight this and get exposure for it, then I think we can bring more venture funds into the mix and get more female founders funded. It's really important for us, and we'll continue to do it as the years move on, and hopefully more venture funds will do the same. We've already seen a little bit of that, so I do think it is moving the needle, and we'll continue to do that. So for us, we're going to announce in a couple of weeks the winners of our Female Founders Fund, so I'm excited to do that. And we're working with the Extreme Tech Challenge on their female founder winner as well. So we're very excited to move those forward.
That's great. Yeah, it has been great to partner with Extreme Tech Challenge on this topic. One of the things I found fascinating is that the odds are even worse for women building companies target at the enterprise. And also women who have a deep science tech. For whatever reason, those get even less of the venture capital dollars. And it's just unclear why. So that's why it's great that we we're focused on that. We know they're out there. I remember, I don't know if you recall, but when we first launched our very first female founders competition focused on enterprise software, people said, oh, there's not that many women in enterprise software. And oh, there were a lot. They just weren't getting the right exposure. And that's what has been so gratifying about these female founders competitions, because we come out with lists of companies that are female founded. I think you probably found the same thing in our latest competition.
Yes, absolutely. And we do have firms that we've invested in just at M12 that are female founders as well, as you know. So we've focused on it both from our competition and from, internally, just finding great companies that are founded by and run by women. So we've had great success with that. This year's winners are even more impressive. I mean, last year's winners were as well, so don't get me wrong, but I'm excited to see more and more companies that are joining the competition and working with Microsoft to, get their businesses going.
Yeah. And I think, while we're doing, our part in this, it's not going to move the needle on the percentage, but the goal is just to raise the awareness. And it's great to see Extreme Tech Challenge have a focus as well on female founders. The trends are very slow to change, but the more we can alert partners in industry, our VC partners, this shared responsibility, I think the more we'll initiate some change along the way. And it's, we are bringing more awareness, and XTC is as well. So I think that then kind of prods others to look as well and to join in the effort. It's interesting. I was looking at some data the other day, and investing in women isn't just charity. It's not just a good, that's a nice thing to do. It's actually really good for business. There's a lot of data out there that show that female-run companies actually have a higher profit margin. And so when you can kind of draw it back to a business outcome, it tends to get attention as well. So I want to do both things. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what other pathways beyond competitions that possibly is M12 exploring to source investments from underrepresented groups?
Yeah, so, we also, in addition to our Female Founders competition, we sponsor All Raise, which is a Female Founders Alliance. And it's a nonprofit. We're doing Women in Cloud, which has been very successful. There's another group that we're affiliated with called Accelerate Her. And those are all sources that we look to not only try to advance, but we look for investments from those sources as well. And as you probably saw, we announced our Black and Brown Founders event and funding. So we are working on that as well to provide education to that group and general assistance from Microsoft, as you know, and you pointed out earlier that we have a lot of resources where we can help startups, and we want to make that available and for people to continue to work with us. It's such a win-win to get more sources of new startups.
It really is. Yeah, I was super excited with the announcement that came out yesterday. And again, I think those things create waves, and then others say, hey, well, we're going to do that too. And so then you get some momentum. Yep. And you get going on it. It's interesting that I was telling the story about the Connect team. And one thing that we can control is when you design teams, we can absolutely control who goes on to the team. And we've found that diverse teams tend to create products that serve more people. Again, a business outcome. If you serve more people will buy the product. It seems like a simple equation. So I'm always thinking about how to leverage the power of diversity, because I know that creating space for different experiences and different points of view, allowing everyone to speak at a table when you're ideating, that generates the best ideas. And I guess if you were going to build a company today, how would you think about the whole recruiting and hiring process, knowing that diversity creates a good business outcome. But how do you actually do that as you're looking to recruit and hire into a company that you're starting?
Yeah, so I really think it has to be part of what we talked about earlier, which is the culture and your process, right? So creating a diverse team from the beginning will create a better product. And we know that at Microsoft and a lot of other big companies that are our partners and our friends. We see the success of having a diverse team. You talked about it on the Connect side of things. I used to manage Samsung for a while when I was at Microsoft, and I remember a story they told me about coming out with the first Note and how it was a very large phone that you could write on, right? And they had no idea, but it took off for females. They loved the idea of having a bigger phone and being able to write things down. And it became one of their most successful products, not just for female users, for everybody. But as they designed new products, they started to bring, a more diverse group together. And I know that they've made great products because of that, as has Microsoft, right? The more diverse teams that we have looking at our solutions, the better the products have been. And so as these companies get started, start out from a diverse perspective, because the product will be better. And I think it's, I think it's easier to do from the beginning. And so, we are constantly advising people to do that from the start. And I think it's happening. I'm seeing it. It's not going to happen overnight, but I do think it's happening.
Yeah, no, I see signs of it as well. Certainly more signs now than earlier in my career. So that's very gratifying.
Yes.
I know many of the finalists today are still early stage, but I'm sure each has probably thought about what an exit might look like. And I'm often asked at Microsoft what we look for when we're evaluating a potential acquisition. And one of the things we really place a premium on is the team, the talent and the culture of that company, just to ensure that it's going to be value add, but probably more importantly, that it has alignment with our own culture and mission. Because if we brought a team in that didn't align, there'd be a toxic response, and it just wouldn't work out, and you would have lost all the value. So that is super important when we look at a company. So from your perspective, what should startups be thinking about today, either in their own path to an IPO or to make themselves a more attractive acquisition target, given what we know about talent and culture and team dynamics?
Yeah. Well, I'd be remiss not to say, the financials are probably still the number one thing that people look at from an acquisition, or especially getting to an IPO from an IPO perspective. But it really is true that if you have a more diverse team, you will have a better product. If you have a better product, you should be more profitable and have more sales. So there's a lot of logic into when you create that team from the beginning. So I still push on that because that's important. I mean, there are some stats out there that say companies with more diverse management team have 19% higher revenues due to innovation. Well, that alone should get somebody closer to a finish line, whether it's an acquisition or an IPO. So I can't stress it enough to do that. Also, there's several states now that are requiring diversity on boards. And so if your direction is to become public, start early. Get your diversity on your board started from the beginning so that you're not scrambling, trying to pull that off at the end, because it'll be hard to do. And you will get more from having a diverse board, like having a diverse workforce, if you start from the beginning.
Right. It's much easier to start that way than to change it.
Yes.
Along the way. So on that note, we should probably wrap up this portion. Thank you, Tamara, for joining me today and for sharing your insights with this amazing group of entrepreneurs that we have on the line. I'll just wrap up by saying that, culture will always be a work in progress. That's something that we found at Microsoft. We're never done. We keep asking questions, we keep listening, we keep modifying, fine tuning. It's never done. It's something that requires intention as well as attention, for sure. And as you're building your companies, you really need to foster the environment that you're looking to build. So even while we've seen great progress at Microsoft, we know the work is never done, but I promise you, when you're building your companies, that you'll see greater dividends in the long run by investing in culture early and often. It's just super important. With that, Rajiv, I think I'll turn it over to you for any questions. I think we have a Q&A session up next.
Yes, we do. Thank you, Peggy, Tamara. That was fantastic. And thank you for inspiring us to have the female founders track as part of XTC. It's been wonderful to include it. And just a point to note, 17 of the XTC finalists have female founders. So that's really amazing. We're proud of that. It is. So glad to be working with you all for that. We did get a few questions along the way. So let me start with the first one. This will be from Ilan Samish from Amai Proteins. Ilan, would you like to ask the question directly? You're on mute, Ilan.
Yes,
there you go.
Thank you. Thanks for an excellent talk. And I would like to ask, as Microsoft is a leader in expanding software to new frontiers, what is your views of moving into life sciences, computational biology? I'll just add, I have a personal history with Microsoft that wanted to headhunt me to help with Alexa because of my computational biology AI background. And yet with AMI, which is redesigning proteins for right now sugar substitute and other proteins, we did not hear from Azure, we did not hear from Microsoft. We got hundreds of thousands of dollars of cloud computing grants from GCP and AWS, and somehow with Microsoft, we are still not feeling it. I also didn't see so many portfolio companies in M12 in life sciences. What is your view on the future of life sciences in Microsoft?
Right, I mean, that's a great question. And I would say we're early in that space. We have done a few investments and acquisitions, smaller ones. We have a great engagement with Adaptive Biotechnologies, where we're looking at their ability to map the human immune system. And largely, we're teaming up with companies to help them sort of navigate their data that they have. A lot of them have a lot of data. They don't have the tools to reason over that data, to engage with AI, because what they know is biology and not software. So we're starting there. We're teaming up with some companies early on to engage with them and help them solve problems that they're trying to solve. We do have, with COVID, clearly that's shown us the importance of getting more deeply involved in this area. And we have a number of engagements with healthcare organizations across the US and actually globally to help them with, as they were pulling in all of this data around COVID, to help them reason over it and to take databases, unstructured databases, and put them together and look at it from a broader sense, obviously all layered in with the right privacy and security in place. But I would say we're probably earlier in this category than in some of the others, but you will see us start to move into this more and more because data is kind of the lifeblood here. And to the extent that these companies need help reasoning over it, we'll use our tools on that. I don't know, Tamara, from your perspective, there's some good work going on in the next BD side of M12.
Yep, you're right, Peggy.
Yeah.
We actually just hired, literally last week, a biotech expert that came out of Harvard and has done a bunch of investing both in health and general biotech. So Alon would love to make that introduction for you. We'd love to talk to you. I will also solve your Azure problem. So my email is tamara@m12.vc. Please email me today and I'll make sure we get some focus on that. That's unfortunate that we didn't reply. So I'll take that on personally and make sure we take care of you. And then I'll also introduce you to our new expert who knows a lot more about this than I do.
Thank you.
The reason
I didn't say there was a problem. I just said there is a fit here and somehow it's still not going smoothly, but it's not a problem.
Okay, well, I will help. And the other thing is we generally at M12, we like to make sure we can help you. So we want to have experts. We want to have the ability to make sure we can get you assistance from Microsoft. So if we don't have that expertise, we're a fairly small team of 25. So it's not, you know, a huge part of Microsoft, but we are moving in that direction. So I'd love to make that intro.
Thank you.
The next question we have is from David Z. And his question is, Microsoft has set aggressive carbon goals. Is M12 central to achieving those?
Yeah, that's another great question, because we just made an announcement, I would say it was the end of January or so, about a separate fund, a sustainability fund that Microsoft is launching. It's $1 billion fund, so it's a big, bold announcement. And we are looking at really creating, having impact in this area by looking at all of the emerging technologies in this space that could possibly accrue value to solving for the massive issues we have in our climate. Someone else had asked a question also, is it just software or would we look at hardware as well? I would say we're more focused on software, given that that's sort of our wheelhouse. But I understand the team is really looking across the board. So I wouldn't let that stop you from approaching the team that is looking at this at Microsoft, and we can send around a link. Actually, it's on our website if you can navigate over to the Sustainability Fund and learn a little bit more about it. But I'm super proud that the company has taken a move like that, because I think it does help uncover some amazing technologies that without a fund like this might not see the light of day. So if you can sort of supercharge them along the way, we might see them earlier, and we all know we need it earlier. We have some, you know, some not so wonderful things going on with the environment. And if some of these amazing technologies can be brought to light sooner, we have the hope of solving and coming up with some solutions for the world.
And the person who had asked that question, she had a second half of the question, and she is actually one of the female founders. So KK, would you like to directly ask the next question to Peggy and Tamara?
Sure. Hi. So we have a company called Sati, and we make biodegradable and compostable sanitary pads from banana tree fiber. We're basically interested in kind of sustainable manufacturing for absorbent products. And my other question is about onboarding and team building. So those are two ways that you can kind of instill culture early. And I was wondering if you have any suggestions for different tactics like this that you use in either of those two scenarios to try to help instill the culture early, because I think that's a really important point that you made earlier.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for your focus on sustainable manufacturing, particularly in that area. I feel like these days, every time I have something to throw out, I think, you know, is this really right? Is there another, do we really need all this packaging? And so it's such a great focus. And so thank you for doing that. As far as onboarding, we have at Microsoft, we have a fairly strong process in place. I think what we have found, we're shifting our focus a little bit. So we have a strong process. You come in, you share all of the data. Obviously, Teams helps us, because now you can enter a team and see the channel going back, many months, and you can see all the conversations and the presentations. It's all right there for you. So collab tools are a big part of onboarding, and I would encourage you to, if not Teams, adopt a collab tool, because it helps your new employees feel part of the team. They can see the history, they can get engaged much more quickly. We're starting to shift our focus a little bit to the inclusion part of it. So when we have an early employee, that first 6 months is very critical to ensure that they feel that they're being heard, that they're part of the team. So for instance, if you have an employee that's somewhat quiet, outreach to them, make space in the conversations when you're sitting around a meeting table so that everyone can talk. You know how it is, a few people may talk more than others, but if you as the leader can create a little gap there for everyone's voice to be heard, we have found that really helps our onboarding stick, if you will. After we put a lot of time and energy into ensuring everybody has all the information they need, if we can get them comfortable in the environment, that they feel like they're part of the team, that creates a sustained team. And we have a loyal employee who wants to stay with us because they feel heard. So I would say look at both sides of it, not only the on-ramp, but also the ongoing. I don't know, Tamara, if you have anything to add to that from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the stronger things we do as a company that we talked about at another chat I was on this week was our inclusion index and how we send that out as a poll. And even some of the smaller companies that we were talking to, they went out to, you can find our inclusion index, it's public, it's www.aka.ms/WAC inclusion report, we publish it. But the interesting thing about that is it has like 5 or 6 questions that we ask all of our employees about inclusion, and they seem like they're like very loose, but they're really not. And people loved them, and they love understanding that we're asking about inclusion early on. And I think that can be a way to make sure everyone's heard early on as well. So take a look at our inclusion and diversity report, because I think there's some great tips in there that would, even as a small company, give you some great ideas.
Definitely.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you, Tamara. A question, I mean, of the discussions around hit refresh and what we have heard from the startups, and then I got some personal pings also on the side. At this stage of the pandemic, and then where we are, and then looking forward, from a Microsoft perspective, what are some of the key technology areas that are critical or crucial going forward? And I guess it also applies from a startup perspective also, because they kind of join paths at some point in time. So would love to hear your ideas on those.
Yeah, I think the technologies that we thought were critical before COVID, we think are going to be critical post-COVID. So just for some context, we spend about $12 billion every year in research and development at the company. So we're looking at every emerging technology you can think of. And M12 is one of the levers that we use to closely examine those emerging technologies. But I would say the key areas of focus for us continue to be largely 3 areas. The first is artificial intelligence. That was really brought into use during COVID for some of the engagements I talked about with the healthcare companies to quickly analyze data. What are the trends, the retransmission rate of the virus? All of that was sort of super powered by the tool of artificial intelligence. So I see that continuing post-COVID. The other area is mixed reality. So we make the HoloLens glasses, which you can kind of think as a computer on your eyes. It's augmented where you see your world around you, and then we can interpose data on top of that. And we think post-COVID, clearly contactless, touchless scenarios are becoming more and more in demand. We've heard that already from a lot of our companies, particularly our industrial companies, folks running factories, things like that. So mixed reality, the idea of from afar viewing something without having to touch it is we think going to be critical to continuing to stay safe. And then longer term, and this is a few more years out, is the whole area of quantum computing. all of this number crunching with artificial intelligence and the high bandwidth required for mixed reality is going to need more and more powerful computers to process. And our classical computers have a limit. They have sort of a physical limitation. And so the next big step there is going to quantum computing, which will sort of bring a nonlinear processing power to bear. It's not easy to do. We are working on it. Several other companies are working on quantum computing, but we know it can be done. It's sort of on the horizon now rather than maybe over the horizon, but that's going to be a crucial piece to just reasoning over all of the data that we're going to have to do in the post-COVID world, I believe.
No, thank you, Peggy. And in quantum compute, there's also a lot of startup activities, and there's
Yes.
like IonQ is a company that both Samsung and Microsoft have invested in. So yeah, a lot of things to be seen and done for sure. We're at the top of the hour, so that was fantastic to have both Peggy and Tamara with us. You know, we're in startup land, so what's the best way for folks from the startups to contact you? I guess through you, Tamara, they can reach out.
Yeah,
That'd be the best channel.
that would be great. Really simple, just tamara@m12.vc. We love to talk to any new startup that is looking for funding, and if M12 is not the right place, I'll find the right place for them in Microsoft.
Thank you so much.